Beautiful dreamer, wake unto me, starlight.
Hi, this is Maria from DressPatternMaking.com. This video is part of my updated bodice block instructions. I have redone these instructions because I have refined my system. I have created two videos with the exact same content for the bodice back, but one in imperial measurements, the other in metric. The differences are the grid in the background for the imperial version is in inches. The grid in the background is in centimetres in the metric versions. The grids are relevant because they match the measurements I am drafting. The blocks I draft are to scale and are generally 40% of the full size block. The grid is therefore also at 40% of the actual size, but the grid measurements match up to the measurements that I am drafting. Now, besides the grid, the other difference is the measurements I give. The ease that is added, or if I talk about lengths of lines, etc., I give those measurements in inches in the imperial version and in centimetres in the metric version. This particular video is the metric version. Tonight, Sunday 18th of April, I am uploading the imperial and metric versions of the new bodice back instructions. Next week, I'll be uploading the two versions of the bodice front. Then the following week, the pants EPUB booklet will be published, and following that, the bodice block booklet. Thereafter, I'll get to patterns. I'll be doing videos and EPUB booklets on various patterns such as dresses, jeans, jackets, etc. If you find my tutorials helpful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee on Ko-fi. Click on the Ko-fi link in my channel header. Now I'll be using Dee Dee, my dressmaker's dummy, for the example measurements. I have created a separate video giving the details for the measurements needed to draft the block, but I will also show them to the left side while drafting to the right. Now, if you haven't already watched my bodice block essential videos, there's 6 in that series, starting with pattern making bust cups versus bra bust cups and finishing up with measuring for the bodice block. I suggest you watch them before starting to draft your bodice block. Before we actually start the drafting though, I want to make sure you understand some terminology. There are a few key measurements I'll be referring to a lot throughout the video, because they're part of a lot of different measurements, and I want to make sure that you are clear what they mean. So the high neck point is the point at the neck side of the shoulder line, and the shoulder point is at the other end of that line at your armhole, but it is definitely on the shoulder line. It's not just some arbitrary point, it's a designated point that you determine when you're taking your measurements, and it does not move. Now the side seam also needs to be firmly established, and the same reference point used for the front arc and the back arc. If you're unsure about where to place the side seam, you need to watch the measurements video. Just another note, if you are unsure of how to determine where the high neck point and the centre back neck points are, putting on a necklace will help you see where the shoulder point should go up to and where the centre back neck point should go up to. To the left is the bodice back I'll be drafting for Dee Dee in this video. It is a sleeveless block that I'm showing you. To the right is the front block, which is not part of this video. Now in my previous videos that I put up a year ago, I said to draft the front first. In this version of my instructions, it doesn't really matter which you draft first. I am drafting the back first, and these back instructions will be available before the front instructions are available. I will be drafting the block just to the body measurements first, so basically drafting a moulage. I will then add the ease for a sleeveless block, and then I will add the ease for the sleeve block. All three options will be together, but it will be clear to see which is which, and one or all can be traced off. Now most block making instructions draft a bodice block that is to be used with sleeves. Now the difficulty with that is that people try it on before putting the sleeves on, and then they think there's too much ease, because sleeved blocks have more ease in the armhole and the upper bust than the sleeveless block. So for that reason, my recommendation is to trace off and make the sleeveless block first for fit. This is just a comparison showing you my sleeveless block in comparison with Dee Dee's. This is to show you how different blocks can look, and if yours ends up looking quite different to Dee Dee's or mine, that's fine, because it will reflect your body shape. Dee Dee's block is to the left, of course, mine is in the middle, and on the right one is on top of the other to better compare them. Now the reason Dee Dee's looks so wide at the armhole and her side seam is so angled is because her upper bust is almost the same measurement as her bust. This means there's a large difference between her upper bust and waist, remembering that the upper bust is at the armhole depth. Now I have a smaller upper bust with only 12 centimeters difference between my upper bust and waist. Dee Dee has 20 centimeters difference between her upper bust and waist. As should be expected, the shape of the block shows you the shape of the person. Having said that, you also really need the front block as well to get an idea of the final shape of the person. This is only giving you an indication of the shape of our backs. You can use either paper or cardboard to draft the block. You will be drafting the moulage, the sleeveless and the sleeve block all together. It's best therefore to keep the original and trace off what you want to use. After you've tested your block and you're sure it's finalised, you can then stick the paper down onto cardboard, as in put tape, sticky tape around the edges, then cut along the block outline. You'll end up with a cardboard block, which is what you use to draft your patterns. Note that I'm showing you the bodice front here, but the concept's the same. It works anytime you want to create a cardboard copy of something you have drafted on paper. In this video, I'll be drafting the half back, which means if any measurements were taken across the full back, they have to be divided by 2. If you have an asymmetric figure, you may eventually want to figure out how each side is different and work with the full back instead of the half back when drafting your patterns. On my website, I have a downloadable PDF with the list of measurements for the bodice block. A link can be found below in the YouTube video description section. If you happen to be watching this video on my website, then it's on the website page. Okay, so let's start drafting. Firstly, on your paper, draw a horizontal line across the bottom of your paper to indicate the waist. No measurement as yet, this is a reference line, and we'll start drafting from this point upwards. So the first measurement is the full length back. This is actually measurement number 23 on my measurement chart. It's the first measurement in the back section. Using your full length back measurement, draw a vertical line from point A on your waistline up to point B. Make sure the vertical line is at right angles to the horizontal waist guideline. Mark points A and B. The measurement, as shown on Dee Dee, is taken from the high neck point to the waist in a straight line. The next measurement is the upper bust arc back, measurement number 3 on the chart. The upper bust arc back measurement is from side seam to side seam at the underarm level. You need to divide the upper bust arc back in 2 for the half block. Using that measurement, measure across from point B in a straight horizontal line, making sure it's at right angles to the A to B line, and mark point C. Then finish the rectangle, drawing a line from C back down to the waist, and mark point D. Make sure all the corners are right angles. Now to be clear, this is just the body measurement, no ease. We will add the ease right at the very end. Next is the centre back length measurement, measurement number 24 on the chart. Using your centre back measurement, measure up from point A on that A to B line and mark point E. Then draw a line at right angles to the A to E line for about 10 centimeters and mark the end of that line, point E2. This is just a guideline and will help us draw the neck curve later. As it's a guideline, it doesn't need to be an exact length, which is why I say for about 10 centimeters. Next is the across shoulder back, measurement number 25 on the chart. Your across shoulder is measured either from the centre back to the shoulder tip or from shoulder tip to shoulder tip and divided by 2. Using the half measurement from centre back to the shoulder tip, measure across from point B towards point C and mark point F. Then draw another guideline. Again, because it's a guideline, it does not need to be an exact length, about 8 to 10 centimeters down from point F at right angles to the B to F line, and mark the end of that line, F2. Now the back neck measurement. This is measurement number 30 on the chart. The back neck measurement is one of those where you could take the half measurement from the centre back to the high neck point, or measure from high neck point to high neck point and divide by 2. But using that half measurement, measure from point B on the B to C line and mark point G. Draw another guideline from point G at right angles to the BC line and mark point G2. The length of that line can be about 8 to 10 centimeters long. Next is the shoulder slope back, measurement number 26 on the chart. Using your shoulder slope back measurement, measure up diagonally from point A on the waistline to touch the F to F2 guideline. Where it touches that guideline, mark point H. Now just a point here, some instructions say to add 1/4 of a centimetre to your shoulder slope measurement for some ease. I just find that when you take those measurements 2 or 3 times, you can be out 1/4 of a centimetre each time you take it. My opinion is just take the body measurement. When you make the toile, it should be obvious if you need a little bit more, and you can add it before you finalise your block. Now a few slides back, we marked the back neck measurement from B to G. Now the issue is that we've taken the measurement of a curve, and if you look at DD on the left, the curve is from the centre back neck to the high neck point, and we're plotting it on the block as a straight line. So let's look at the next slide to see what the problem may be for some people. Now the neck curve we need to draw is from point E to point G. For DD, that curve from E to G ends up being much longer than the measurement from B to G. Now you may ask, why then do the instructions plot it as a straight line if the curve ends up being much longer? Well, for most people, or at least those who fall into the standard category, it won't be a problem. It will work out. DD actually happens to be non-standard. I'll show you how it does work out for most people in the next slide with my block. In my case, the length of the curve from E to G on the right is only slightly longer than the straight line from B to G, which is my original measurement, and that bit of extra length gained in that curve is needed for ease. This is one of the rare instances where I fall into the standard category, and that standard is that there's only about 1.5 centimeters between points E and B. What that means is I have only about 1.5 centimeters difference between my centre back and full length back measurements. The green shaded areas on this slide shows the depth of the back neck curve. You can see that the shaded area on the left, my neck curve, is quite shallow. With that shallow curve, the neck curve ends up being slightly longer than the body measurement, and that slight increase is needed for ease. For those who have more than that 1.5 centimetre difference between the centre back and the full length back, they'll end up with a deep curve from E to G that ends up longer than their back neck measurement, as it does for Dee on the right. She has nearly 3 centimetres difference between her centre back and full length back measurements. So if you fall into that category with a large difference between your centre back and full length back measurements, you'll need to do some adjusting and finessing so that you don't end up with a gaping back neck, or that your high neck point doesn't end up too far out on your shoulder. So basically, you'll have to draw that neckline curve in and measure it. If the measurement from E to G ends up being a lot longer, or quite a bit longer than your actual measurement, you'll need to move point G over to the left and try again. And you'll need to finesse it until you get the curve from E to G to be about 0.5 centimetre longer than your body measurement. The next measurement is the shoulder length, measurement number 8 on the chart. Take your shoulder length measurement and add 1.25 centimetres for a dart. Using that total, shoulder length plus dart amount, draw a line from point G at the neck to pass through point H, the shoulder slope point, and mark the end of that line, point I. I have actually put point I in brackets because the capital I looks like a 1 and the lowercase seems to get lost, so that's the only reason that it's there in brackets. Now mark the midway point on the shoulder line, so midway between point G and I, and mark that midpoint J. Now the waist measurement, measurement number 7 on the chart. Moving down to your waistline, take your waist measurement, that's your whole body circumference, and divide it by 4. Then add 3 3/4 centimetres for the dart. Taking that total, waist plus dart, measure from point A towards point D and mark point K. Again, no ease at the moment. We're going to add ease to the upper bust, bust and waist at the very end. From point K, measure down below the waistline at right angles to the waistline and mark point K2. The amount you measure down is 1/2 centimetre. This will help with the waist curving because the waist is not a completely straight line. Now, using your side seam length measurement, that's measurement number 9 on the measurement chart, measure from point K2, just below the waist, up to touch the C to D line. Where it touches the C to D line, mark point L1. Then draw a guideline inwards for about 5 centimetres from point L1 at right angles to the side seam line and mark point L2. Now, in drawing that side seam line up from the waist to touch the C to D line, we have now defined the underarm point. Point L1 is the underarm point. This means we can now draw in the upper bust line. So draw a line at right angles to the centre back line to touch point L1. You can write upper bust on that line if you wish. Next, take your bust depth at side seam measurement. That's number 17 on the measurement chart. Measure down from the underarm point L1 and mark the bust level. Draw a line from the centre back at right angles to the centre back line to touch this point. Now, I actually neglected to give that point a letter, but it should be okay because we are drawing the line there. Now the across back measurement, measurement number 31 on the chart. Firstly, we need to determine at what depth you'll draw the across back line. In my instructions for taking measurements, I said to make it about halfway between the centre back neck point and the upper bust line. I actually took it a little lower than that on DD. It doesn't have to actually be halfway, just make sure when you've measured it, you determined what depth you did it at. So for example, for DD, I measured down 10.5 centimetres from the centre back neck point and measured her across back at that point on her body, as it were. So then on the block, I will measure down 10.5 centimetres and mark the across back measurement at that depth. Now you can take a French curve and draw the armhole from point I at the shoulder through point N at the across back down to point L1 at the underarm. For DD, I can draw that in one pass with a curve. You may need to draw 2 curves and blend it, depending on your ruler. Now, if you end up with what seems to be a really large back armhole and you have a rounded upper back, chances are you'll have some excess ease in the back armhole. What you'll need to do in the fitting stage is to pinch the excess ease out and measure it, then move that excess into the shoulder dart. We haven't constructed the shoulder dart yet, but we'll be doing that in a bit. However, that fitting does need to be done in the toile stage because it's hard to determine what size dart you need in the shoulder, so you'll always start with the basic amount, and in the toile fitting stage you can increase that shoulder dart width. Now we're going to place the waist dart and mark the width of the dart and draw the centre line of the waist dart up to the upper bust. Now if you're unsure of where to place your back waist dart, there are some general guides on screen. Basically between 7 centimetres and 9 centimetres from the centre back waist. When you make your toile, see if you like it there and move it accordingly if you don't. So taking that measurement, measure across from point A on the waistline towards point D and mark point O. Then measure from point O for the width of the dart and mark point P. We allowed for a 3 3/4 centimetre dart when we marked point K, so from point O to P should be 3 3/4 centimetres. In the middle of that dart, draw a straight line up to the upper bust line and mark point Q. Make sure that that line from the middle of the dart to point Q is at right angles to the waistline. Draw the first dart leg from point Q through point O and go 1/2 centimetre below the waistline and mark point O2. Draw the other dart line from point Q to go through point P to go 1/2 centimetre below the waistline and mark point P2. Check that those two lines are the same length. They need to be the same length. Draw the waist curve in as shown. You will need to extend the mid dart line down below the waist. Then with the help of a curved ruler, draw a curved line from point A at centre back to pass through point O2 and touch the mid dart line that you've extended down. Then turn the ruler over to get the same curve from the mid dart line through point P2. Then draw another curve from point P2 to the side seam point K2. In the measurement video, I suggested that you take your back armhole depth a number of ways for checking purposes. These are measurements 27, 28 and 29 on the chart. So centre back to upper bust, high neck point to upper bust and shoulder point to upper bust on the shoulder slope line. Now we didn't actually use any of these measurements to get the armhole depth, but now it's the time to check those measurements that they do work out. It will just give you an idea of whether you've made some major mistakes. Now if you do actually plot those and they all end up on the same level but not at the upper bust line, then what you'd need to do is check your shoulder slope and full length front before continuing. If after checking the shoulder slope and the full length front you come up with the same measurements, then just draft the block and draw the lines on it and check it at the toile stage. Now we'll construct the shoulder dart. Draw a guideline from point Q, the waist dart point, and point J on the mid shoulder. From point J, measure down that guideline for 7.5 centimeters and mark the dart point R. Now when I say 7.5 centimeters, with all these things, that's a starting point that may need to be finessed. It may be different from person to person. Dee Dee needed a dart that was longer than 7.5 centimeters. Now draw a dart along the shoulder line with J at the center and make that dart 1.25 centimeters wide. Now draw a dart leg from point R through point S and go beyond point S for 1/4 centimeter and mark point U. Measure that dart leg from point R to point U and draw the second dart leg to match that length. So from point R through point T and mark point V. Also, to be able to finish off the shaping of the shoulder line, extend the mid dart line out for a couple of centimeters. Then to draw the shoulder line, start at point I and draw a straight line to point V and continue until you reach the mid dart line. Then draw from the mid dart line to point U, then to point G. On the left is the final shape of the moulage because it still doesn't have any E's, and the shape is from point A at the waist up to point E, centre back neck point, around the neck curve to point G at the shoulder, then to point I, through points U and V on the shoulder to point I, the armhole curve down to L1, down to the waist K2, and then the waist curve back to A. And on the right in pink is the shape without the emphasis on the points. Now this is basically your moulage for the back. If you do sew this up and it doesn't fit, part of that will be that you have no ease. You really do need a little bit of ease in order to be able to do it up. You can't possibly pin it up if it's made to your exact measurements. So now we'll add ease to the side seam. We'll start with a waist ease, and that point will end up being the same for both sleeveless and sleeved block. It will be constant. Now the waist ease is 2.5 centimeters across the whole block, usually divided evenly when you're working in inches, but centimeters it's kind of hard to divide. 2.5 by 4, you end up either losing 0.5 centimeter in rounding down or gaining 0.5 centimeter rounding up. So we'll add 1.5 centimeters to the back and we'll add 1 centimeter to the front. So if we divide that in 2 for the half blocks, that'll be 3/4 centimeter to the half back and 0.5 centimeter to the half front. So move out from the waist point K2 for 3/4 centimeter and mark point X. Then we'll add ease at the upper bust for the sleeveless block first. The sleeveless block will have 7.5 centimeters ease across the whole block. We'll add 2/3 to the back and 1/3 to the front. The reason for that is you tend to reach your arms forward and curve your back more than you reach back and stretch your chest, so the ease is needed more in the back. So that means 5 centimeters added to the back and 2.5 to the front When we're talking about the half blocks then, that's 2.5 centimeters added to the back and 1 1/4 added to the front. So from point L1, measure across on that upper bust line, just extend it out from that upper bust line to point Y. So point L1 to Y is 2.5 centimeters. Then you can draw a line from point Y at the upper bust down to point X at the waist. Now you need to join up those lines from K2 to X and L1 to Y with the French curve. So now we'll measure the bust line to see how much ease we have ended up with. Measure along the bust line from the centre back to the first dart leg, shown as portion A on the slide. Then measure from the other side of the dart leg to the side seam, shown as portion B. Add A and B together, then minus the back bust arc, divided by 2. That's measurement 6 on the chart. We want about 5 centimeters ease in the bust, but that is between the front and the back. In Dee Dee's case, after measuring and adding up A and B, then minusing her back bust arc, there is about 1.5 centimeters ease for the half block. That means 3 centimeters ease total in the back, so we'll check when drafting the front if we end up with 2 centimeters total ease there, which would mean 1 centimeter for the half front. This is just for comparison purposes. The pink dashed line is the moulage, the blue is the sleeveless block. Note that I drafted the moulage with a shoulder length for a sleeve block. For the sleeveless block, you can take a little bit off at the shoulder, 1 centimeter or so. You don't need to go out as far if you don't have the sleeve. If you want to do that, when you redraw the armhole, you can shave a little bit off at the across back if you need to. So now we'll add the ease for the sleeved block, or the block with sleeves. The upper bust ease for the sleeved block is 12.5 centimeters. We have already added 7.5 for the sleeveless block, so there's 5 centimeters remaining. We'll add 2/3 to the back and 1/3 to the front as we did before. So that means 3 centimeters to the whole back, 1.5 centimeters to the half block. And in the front it will be 2 centimeters total, 1 centimeter to the half front. So the sleeve block is also lowered a little bit. So from point Y we'll measure down for 1 centimeter and out 1.5 centimeter to point Z. So the side seam for the sleeve block is from point Z at the upper bust point down to point X at the waist. On this slide, the blue is the sleeveless block and the green is the block with sleeves. I have left the moulage out of this one. So again, the armhole will need a little bit of adjustment with the French curve. Here are 3 blocks for comparison purposes, with all of them having both sleeved and sleeveless versions. On the left is my block, in the middle is a standard block in a size 14, and on the right is Dee Dee. So back to what I've drafted for Dee Dee. I've got 3 options. I've got the moulage, the sleeveless, and the sleeved block. Now, if you've drafted along with your measurements, then I would recommend leaving this as your master, not cutting it up. I would recommend tracing off the sleeveless option and making a toile and testing that first. Though of course you still need to draft the front, and then before you actually make the toile you need to true the front to the back or the back to the front. I recommend you draw all the lines from the block on the toile. Doing this means you can see where you've made mistakes, and also it's much easier to see where the adjustments need to be made. Now, a note on the shoulder slope line. On your block, it's not drawn to the shoulder tip because that's your across back measurement. And in reality, when you sew up the dart, then point I would end up being where point H is on the block. But when you draw that line on your toile, it makes sense to draw it from the centre back waist to the actual shoulder tip. From here on is some general information on truing the front and the back and finishing off your block. You need to do this after drafting both the front and the back. As I said at the beginning, you can draft either the front or the back first in this new system, and so I'm putting this information at the end of both videos. I'm not using the block I drafted for Dee Dee in these following slides. I'm repurposing the slides from my original video to save some time. When we finish both the front and the back, we need to check that the lengths of adjacent pieces match, and also check that there is a nice flow through in the curves. If you need to increase the length of anything, you may need to stick on little bits of paper. I'm not going to be doing that in my example, but just be aware you may have to. So firstly, we'll do the side seam. Put the back and front blocks together at the side seam waist. Check that there's a smooth curve at the waist. Then check the side seam length. Firstly from the waist up to the dart leg. Then check that the remainder matches up. Check that there is a smooth curve through the armhole. Then match the front and back at the high neck point to check the neckline curve. While you're there, mark the shoulder dart placement from the back block onto the front block so that you can check the shoulder length. Move the front block to the other dart leg and check the shoulder lengths are the same. This is especially important when drafting the three options together, the melange and the sleeveless and the sleeved. You may have traced off the sleeveless block on the front and then accidentally trace off the sleeved version in the back. So definitely always check your shoulder lengths match. Then check the flow through curve of the armhole. When you have your final front and back blocks, don't forget to mark and notch the dart legs, label the block, put all the relevant information on it, maybe including the date you drafted it. Note whether it's a sleeveless block or the sleeved block or the melange. Now I did hear a pattern maker say that you don't put the grain line on the block, you put that on the pattern, but I like to have it on my block to remind me to put it on the pattern. Sometimes I forget, and then I get to putting my pattern pieces on the fabric and realize I haven't drawn the grain line on there. So yes, I definitely prefer to put the grain line on the block as a reminder. So here are some final blocks, not Dee Dee's, but this is what the final blocks look like. These ones don't have the bust line or upper bust marked. That was needed during the drafting process for making the toile and getting the measurements right. On the actual blocks, you don't need them. So this is the end of the video. Next week, bodice front. If you find my tutorials useful, please consider buying me a cup of coffee to contribute to the expenses of my website and creating these videos. This is Maria from DressPatternMaking.com. Ciao.
Wake unto me, starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee. Sounds of the rude world heard in the day, loved by the moonlight have all passed away.